Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the ICAST. My name is Michael Doise, and I'm here again with Marty Sobo. Hey, Marty, how are you doing?
Hey, how's it going? Thank you.
And Alicia Geary.
Hello, everyone.
All right, so we'll jump right into it today. The past two episodes, we've been talking a lot about iOS and the watch, but we really have not touched on the Mac. And I feel like today's episode, we really need to give the Mac some love. Don't you guys think?
Yes, definitely.
Of course.
Yeah, because this is an Apple show, and the Mac, we would not have an iPhone without the Mac. And,
that is true.
You know, it was without the Mac, we would not have an iPhone. And, you know, a lot of people forget that iOS was built on top of or from Mac OS. And that was kind of the reasons why I always wanted an iPhone, was because it's a Mac OS iPhone. Was that ever in your thoughts, Marty, back when you got your first iPhone? That's like, oh, it's built off Mac OS, so it must be good.
Yeah, pretty much. But like the whole thing for me was what did I have before the iPhone came out? I believe it was a BlackBerry, I want to say. And I had all kinds of syncing issues and, you know, stuff wouldn't work. I was still a Mac user, but since there was no iPhone, you have to use something else. And at the time, using a BlackBerry, it worked, but it was a real pain in the rear to get your contacts and your calendars and all that stuff really syncing between the computer and the device. So when the iPhone came out, it was really awesome that it just worked. There was no issue, especially being a Mac user. It just all of a sudden worked. And it was no big deal to be able to sync your stuff seamlessly. But once you saw how seamless it was actually a big deal, because before it was a real pain, like I said. So that solved a lot of problems for me when I got my first iPhone.
My previous phone to the iPhone, because I've had Android phones, but I don't count them because they're smartphones, and the iPhone was always my primary. But my first smartphone, or my previous smartphone to the iPhone, was the Moto Q. Did you ever see one of those?
I don't even remember. There used to be a whole bunch of different Android phones at the time.
Well, these weren't even Android phones. They were Windows Mobile, not even Windows Phone, Windows Mobile.
Wow. Oh, you know what? They did do some Windows Mobile phones for a little while, and they were out, but I think only a few years, and then they just discontinued them because I don't think they did very well.
Right. Well, they did great before there was an iPhone, you know, and before Android.
All the Android users who wanted to stick with Windows.
Right. So that was my previous phone. I think it used micro USB or something like that to charge. It was like, and it's crazy to think about micro USB just finally went out of style not long ago. But I am kind of digressing into a tangent here, but it's macOS changed the world. When we had macOS 10, especially like Panther, Tiger, all of those cat-named macOSs, that's when things were really getting shaped and changing, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. I remember when Tiger came out, it was a huge big deal. And one of the things they did was they had a Tiger operating system party all in all the Apple stores and stuff like that to, announce the Tiger operating system. And I remember going to a couple places and they had full-on party mode going on, and they were just straight up selling Tiger, because at the time when Tiger came out, they were still selling the operating system. They weren't giving it away for free. Right. So that's one thing to think about. And another thing to think about was it wasn't in the Apple store yet. There wasn't really like a Mac app store yet. So you were buying it on DVD at the time. Right. So
like $30.
It was a big deal.
Something.
You'd go in and you'd buy it, and they'd give you this small box that was a square, and it was around the size of a... Yeah, it was like around the size of like a DVD, right?
Yeah.
It had all the graphics and everything on it.
And then you would buy iWork. And do you remember iLife for the Mac?
Oh, yeah. That had, what was that? It had iMovie, and then it had iWeb, I think, and iDVD.
Yes, iWeb.
iDVD.
iDVD.
Oh, what the heck is iWeb? Please educate me.
It was a website creation tool from Apple.
Yeah.
It was
actually
really
the three
cool.
apps that were in there. So you had iWeb, that was for making websites, and that was Apple's attempt at software to be able to make websites.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had iDVD, which is their attempt to create DVDs so you could take all your videos and all that stuff in iMovie. And then when you would export it out, you would use iDVD to make all the start menus and all the graphics and stuff when you would put the DVD in.
Yep.
So why doesn't iWeb exist anymore? Do you know how profitable that would be now?
Well, because they don't sell their software anymore, or at least they
Right.
don't sell their regular software to consumers anymore. They usually just give it all away for free. They used to sell iWork and what was the iLife? They used to sell those two products
for like
when they would still
$100 each.
Yeah, when they were still putting them out on DVDs, but when they transitioned to the store and having everything in the store, they made all of that software come on all the computers, and you can just get it for free through the Mac App Store. So they stopped giving it away.
They could do iWeb like they do Logic Pro and Final Cut Pro. It could be like a professional software.
The reason is that iWeb got way out of date very quickly, and they didn't want to put forth the resources to keep it up, keeping with standards, keeping with what you needed to do. So they said others are already doing that now, so we don't really need to keep that up.
Oh.
And it's useless now anyway. Who buys DVDs now?
Right. Well, for a while, you could buy it in the Mac App Store. It was a thing. Well, iLife, yeah, it's true. I mean, people still buy DVDs, but not many people have. Well, no Macs have DVD burners. You'd have to hook
They
one
don't
up
even have
externally.
optical drives at all anymore. So it's kind of why would they still continue to put that software out there?
Right.
If they're not even putting optical drives in computers anymore.
Really,
Yeah.
It's very interesting where the Mac came from, and all of that to say that the Mac has changed much since I started with it. And, Marty, I think you started with the Mac before I did, and Alicia's learning more about the Mac. Now, we all come from different places with it, but we wanted to talk today about the different types of Macs, who they're meant for, and why buy them. And that line has really blurred a lot in the last couple of years with Apple Silicon, wouldn't you say?
Definitely.
Because, an M1 or an M2 can do pretty much what most people need to do, and not even with a fan. So,
that is true.
And more.
And I think that's kind of where the M3, we're not even considering the M3 having hardware-based ray tracing for games, like NVIDIA high-quality graphics card level of stuff on the base chip, not the Pro or the Max or the Ultra, on the base chip. I mean, we don't have this confirmed, but if the A17 Pro has that, then the M3, I'm sure it will. So, and it's interesting because in the past, iOS was based off of macOS. Now, a lot of macOS and Macs are based off of iOS. I find that very interesting.
Yeah. Well, I think they're doing a lot of that because they feel like if they make the computers look more like iOS, it will look easier and consumers will be more apt to buy an actual computer if it looks easier, right? If it looks familiar to them. Because a Mac right out of the box is going to be nothing like your phone or your iPad, right? So
right.
I think they're making that attempt to, if you want to, make it look more like your iPhone or your iPad. And I think that makes it look easier to people. And they say, oh, if I want a computer and look, it looks just like my phone or my iPad with the icons and whatever it is, then I think they'll sell more computers. But if they make it where it's still super difficult and people are scared to dive into something they have no idea about, which is actually a thing. So,
one thing I really miss, and I know it's a little thing, but one thing I miss on the older Macs was the light up Apple logo. That was just awesome.
Yeah. And if you go back to like the 90s when they were building laptops, the late 90s and into the early 2000s, not only did the logo light up, but it was actually upside down. So when you would open the lid on a laptop, the Apple logo, if you were to look at it from the back side with the laptop open, the logo the Apple logo on the lid would be upside down.
Really?
Yeah, they finally changed that a few years later. But the thought process in that originally was when it's closed, you'll see the Apple logo right on the top there, right? But then when you open it up and it lights up from the back side, it's upside down. So now they flipped it around, and now it's actually the right side up.
Interesting.
If you go back and look at old photos, you'll see.
Interesting.
Like, go check out the titanium.
Titanium?
Yeah.
Really interesting stuff. I've had so many Macs over the years, and I came on when right at the transition from PowerPC to Intel. And those were the days, let me tell you.
Yeah. That was a huge jump like it was now. PowerPC got so slow, they made the jump to Intel, and it had huge speed jumps. It was kind of similar to when we went from Intel to M processors. And now we have that same huge jump again when we're leaving Intel and going to the M processors with major speed improvements, like ridiculous speed improvements.
So let's start off with the MacBook Air. And the MacBook Air has always been a fan favorite for a long time because it's kind of the everything computer, like the computer that everybody can use for surfing, email, web browsing, and all that. But I don't feel like it's that anymore. It's not just your standard computer anymore, especially with the M2 Air, which is currently on sale for like $10.99 or $10.49 right now, which is crazy. The M2 Air is just, it has a very sleek design. I feel like I was never a big fan of the wedge. So when they went to this more boxy design, I love that because it kind of heralds back to the older Apple designs. And I like those. I like those Mac designs. So Marty, do you have an Air or do you just have Pros?
Just a Pro. I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. I have a 16-inch MacBook Pro.
Yes. And I have one of those too, but I didn't know if you had an Air or not, but
I've had Airs in the past. I just don't have one right now.
One of the interesting thing was the OG, or not OG, but one of the older MacBooks, that 12-inch MacBook, you could get it in the gold color. That was a very neat machine. But the Air, because I think they're still selling the M1 Airs, and they kind of have that old wedge shape, and they work really well. But the M2 is just that redesign that we were waiting for. And that's really, in my opinion, where you want to go. I feel
like the M1 MacBook Air does have a place, and for someone who wants to get into the Mac ecosystem, but they don't have a lot of money, that's a really great place to start, because even though we're heading into M3 territory, the M1 is still a super fast computer. I mean, if you want to get into the Mac ecosystem and this is going to be your first Mac, or maybe your first Mac in a long time, and you just want something that can kind of do a little bit of everything, it will, I still think it's a great machine, definitely for the price. It's below $1,000 now. So we're talking, I think around $800 is what it is. And you see them on sale all the time. So
the only thing on the M1 though is it still has that 720p front camera, and it's kind of garbage at this point. It's not, if you're doing any conferencing or things like that, it is just not a very good camera. And I feel like for $100 more, you're getting a better experience, more future proofing and things like that. So.
But if you already have an iPhone, that's what continuity camera is for.
Right. If you want to set up continuity camera and buy the stand and all those other things for it too. So it just depends on what you're willing to do. The M1 does have its place though. Like if you're just wanting something to get started in the ecosystem, it's great. I will tell you, at least on the M1 MacBook Air that I had, gaming was a little difficult on it. Even like I put Minecraft up to, I think they call it fabulous graphics, and it ate the MacBook Air M1 for lunch. The M2 Air with the same specs, it was able to run perfectly well on. So it just depends on what you're trying to do.
Right. And at the same time, the thing that's frustrating is it's confusing to consumers when they go, okay, I can get the M1 MacBook Air because that's in my budget and it's something that I can afford. But then there's also the 13-inch MacBook Pro, which I wouldn't suggest anyone to buy, but people do buy it because they think, oh, well, that's a Pro instead of an Air. That must be better, right? So personally, I don't really think anyone should buy the 13-inch MacBook Pro, but it's there and people do buy it. So
the only advantage it has, and it has the same case and screen and everything of the Air, but the one diff of the M1 Air, but it has an M2. It still has, I like to call it the potato cam because it's terrible, and of the M1. So 720p on a more expensive M2 Pro. So I just can't recommend that machine. It also has, if you like the touch bar, though, that's why you'd buy that machine. But I really like just actual function keys where you know what they do.
Right.
Also, the Touch ID sensor on all of the M2 models, except for that 13-inch, has a round recessed little area for your finger. Whereas the M1 Air and the M2 13-inch Pro do not. It's just a flat button.
Right.
Also, the one thing to keep in mind is that the M1 Air and the M2 Pro 13-inch have I think they have 2 or 3 ports. I don't remember the port now.
The M1 MacBook Air has 2 ports, one USB-C on each side of the machine, and that's it. So the downfall to that, there's no MagSafe like on the newer machines.
Right.
Like the M2 MacBook Air has MagSafe. So that means you can charge and still have 2 open USB-C ports to do whatever it is you need to do. On the M1, since you only have 2 USB-C ports, you're taking up one of them because you have to charge it or if you need to plug in power. So that is definitely a reason to bump up, in my opinion.
Right. And
especially if you're doing pro work podcasting or doing anything like that, you could plug in a USB-C hub and gain some more ports. You just have to make sure that the USB-C hub that you get has pass-through power so that you can utilize the hub with other devices as well as charging the machine.
And the M2 Air is also a lot. I think it's lighter, but I think it might be the same.
Yeah, I think it's the weight is distributed a little bit differently and more evenly, I want to say, because of its new shape, where on the wedge shape, it tends to be heavier lopsided wise because of the shape, more towards the back. So I think people like the even weight better. It feels more solid and center of gravity.
And a lot of people worry that having a fan is going to be, or not having a fan on the M2 Air is like, oh no, it doesn't have a fan. Well, it actually runs really well. You could do video editing and high quality stuff for about 20 minutes before you start seeing degradations in speed. That's a lot of time. Like if you're rendering something or doing something like that, that's quite a bit of time.
Yep.
The M2 iPad Pro doesn't have a fan.
All iPads don't have a fan.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
But you're also not going to get the same kind of renders and things like that in projects that you could see on a Mac.
Yeah, you might be right.
There's Adobe Audition, there's Adobe.
Are you talking about for iPad?
No, on Mac.
Are you talking about audio editing software?
Or video editing on it's Audition isn't that the audio thing from Adobe?
They actually have Premiere,
that was what I was looking for.
Yeah.
You don't have Premiere on iPad. You don't have several of the other high quality video and those kind of things on the iPad. So people are going to try to put their 8K quality stuff through these Airs, and it'll really toast out at those 8K videos.
Although you can put Final Cut Pro and Logic on an iPad now.
You can. And I do feel like, though, there are limitations in each of these versions on the iPad, and they've done a good job, but they still have a ways to go to be comparable to the desktop apps, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, the power. That's another whole thing.
Well, I think the devices have the power. They could do it, but it's just manipulation and getting all the stuff in there effectively and working with, 30 or 40 tracks I mean, maybe it's because I'm not a touch first person. It would be difficult for me while, doing things. So,
yep.
I was doing it yesterday and I didn't really have any problems, but
yeah, but you're not working with 30 or 40 tracks.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't think I would ever have to.
If you're doing video or if you're doing, a podcast with a lot of people, or even if you're making music, like if you're doing any kind of music creation, then you're using a lot of different tracks, a lot of loops, a lot of different things. So I just feel like on the iPad, I would probably take twice as long as if I was doing it with my computer. And even when I was trying to edit with Logic on the iPad, I could do Command T on the computer to split and do all those things, and they didn't work correctly on the iPad. I'm like, oh, this is bothering me. So again, I think that the Air is a great computer, going back to Macs. One thing that you'll notice, if you compare sizes, the iPad Pro is 13-inch or 12.9 or 11-inch. The Air is 13 inches, but the Air does not have as good of a display as the iPad. So those are things you need to consider when you're buying your Pro devices. Now, I think we're about there to talk about the pros, wouldn't you say, y'all?
Yeah, definitely.
So if you bump up to the 14-inch MacBook Pro, though, you are getting what you get with an iPad Pro, plus more. And the reason why I say that is the 14 and 16-inch have amazing speakers. The Air speakers are good. I'm not saying they're not. They're decent. They're not my favorite Mac speakers. And so we have that 14-inch Pro. And you could get the M2 Pro or M2 Max chip in that machine. I don't recommend going with the Max, and do you guys know why?
Why?
Heat dissipation.
Right.
It doesn't have as much of a surface area to dissipate heat as the 16-inch. So even though there's a fan, it will throttle that down a little more at a faster rate on the 14-inch.
They're trying to squeeze all the same hardware into a smaller space. That's
right.
That's interesting.
Plus battery life, Well,
there definitely is a bigger battery in the 16. That's for sure.
Oh yeah. And it's crazy to think I've had my M1 16-inch for 2 years now. Like it has not slowed down in that amount of time. Like OS updates, everything, it's still kicking.
Yep. They're great machines. I like them because you get one of the Pros 14 or 16 and you got everything you need, really. You don't even really need a dongle because they've come back and loaded it up with all the necessities and all the ports and stuff. So, you're really good to go. It even has MagSafe, so you don't even have to utilize one of the USB-C ports to deal with charging. So you still get to keep your machine charging if you need to, and still have all your USB-C ports or Thunderbolt ports in a Mac Pro case right there. So,
yeah, and they are Thunderbolt ports, so you can, you can plug in any good display or any high-speed hard drive. Just be careful of SanDisk, and and you'll be up and running, and it's just going to be a very fast computer. It's going to do everything you need, and I mean, that thing's future-proofed. I've been developing for 2 years, and I think I'm just going to wait it out for the M3 Pro and Max.
I would agree.
Yeah. The other thing is these screens are ProMotion with the Retina. I don't know if it's Retina or Super Retina displays, but basically that means they're using the mini LEDs that they use on the iPad Pros. So it looks fantastic.
Yep. And the camera's much better than on the MacBook Air, at least a low-end one. So that's you get some better resolution out of that. Battery life's way longer. You have all the ports that you need. I mean, you're good to go. You get one of those and you're pretty much set.
The speakers are good. The keyboard also has really good. So anything on the M2 lineup except for I don't know if the M2 Pro 13-inch has the butterfly keys still, but I know that it is a bit of a different typing experience. I do find on the Air that the key travel is not as good as my 16-inch or even the 14-inch Pros. So that's one thing to keep in mind is your typing experience. But all of the trackpads are amazing on the Macs. One thing you'll notice is compared to like the iPad Magic Keyboard, the trackpad on there is a diving board style or something similar where you click it, it actually clicks down, kind of like a PC trackpad, whereas the Mac, it's all haptics now.
Yep. It's kind of run by software.
And you know, it's weird because I tell people, and you could do a test on this, you could tell people, turn off your Mac. Your trackpad will not move. It will not move
true,
at all.
actually.
Yeah. And it really like, no, I know that's not true. It still will click. I'm like, no, it won't. It won't do it. It's just a big sheet of glass and it's fooling you into thinking that it's clicking by using haptics.
Yeah, and they did that. I think that originally started was with the iPhone 8, right? Where it still had a home button, but it didn't actually move. It was kind of more software. If you were to turn your phone off.
It was the 7.
Oh, it was the 7. So
it was the 7.
Which is basically the same body style. But if you were to turn the phone off, the button just doesn't do anything. So I think that's where they took that technology and brought it into the Magic Trackpad. I think it works better because there's a less chance of failure, really, you know, because it's not actually moving. So.
I could be wrong, but I don't remember what year the 7 came out. But I believe that these trackpads have been on Mac since 2013. So I think they actually took the technology from the Mac to the iPhone. But I could be wrong. It could be the reverse.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I just know they both have the same technology.
The world will never know.
Well, the Google knows, but we just don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a very interesting, you know, they take their technology from device to device and it's like, oh, well, we did this here. Let's put it here, you know? So I'm a huge fan of the MacBook Pros, and, you know, it works with any hard drives or anything you plug in that's USB-C.
Interfaces, displays, cameras, whatever.
So I guess one of the things that we can do is we could talk about the different use cases. So like Marty, if you're audio editing or doing audio production, what would you use?
My number one favorite thing is a desktop. You know, whenever I'm in the home studio, I always want to be using a desktop as much as I can. I just feel like you can spread out a little bit more. You've got a bigger keyboard. You're more comfortable. Typically, you've got more ports to plug stuff in and spread stuff out, all of that. There's really nothing wrong with laptops, but I just like having the bigger setup just for the space and being able to feel like I'm more spread out. You know, you can use a regular full-size keyboard and a bigger display. You know, currently I'm running a 32-inch display on this particular machine that I'm on right now. So that's what I would prefer is, you know, a desktop typically.
So we hadn't even talked about desktops, so let's go through those. So the Mac Minis, I think, are their very most popular desktop.
Now they are, yeah.
Yeah. And they have, you know, several kinds, and they put the M2 Pro in these desktops.
I saw the Mac Mini, and the first thing I thought was, man, does it look kind of like an Apple TV box?
Yes, they do.
It looks like an Apple TV box. It's so tiny.
Although you haven't seen the new Apple TVs, they're even smaller. Like they can almost fit in the palm of your hand now.
So on the Mac Mini line, you know, we start with the regular ones, and the regular ones are probably the cheapest Mac that you can get into. I believe they start at, what is it, $599 or $499?
I think, yeah.
Yeah, somewhere right in there. You get the M2 processor, just a standard M2 processor, 256 SSD hard drive, and 8 gigs of RAM. And of course, you can bump up the memory on that to 16, and I believe you can go up to a terabyte on the hard drive on the regular. Maybe you can go to 2 now. I can't remember which, but it's either 1 or 2 terabytes if you want to bump it up.
I think it's 2, but I'm not sure.
So that would be the regular one. That's a great entry-level desktop machine if you're trying to get into the Mac ecosystem for an affordable price. It's still super fast and powerful, and you can do a lot with it. I know people who are running just the baseline M2 MacBook or Mac Mini, and they say super powerful and does everything they need to do for the most part. Every once in a while, if you're rendering like a ton of stuff, it will kick the fans up, and you'll see a little bit of heat going through the machine at that point. But for the most part, for day-to-day stuff, it is a great machine for day-to-day stuff. Yeah.
And you could hook it up to your Windows equipment too. Like if you have a Windows keyboard, Windows monitor, all of that stuff.
Yep, that's true.
You know what? I kind of chimed into this thinking that I wouldn't really have much to contribute because I've never used a Mac. But I've actually been contemplating, how I would get into the Mac ecosystem. And now that I think about it, I never even thought of just maybe investing in like a Mac Mini and maybe like a good monitor or something. Because if you really think about it, like I have for my lightweight work device, I could just take my iPad wherever I need it to be to do work on the go because it does everything I need it to do. So my Mac Mini can stay at home and sit on my desk with a monitor, and I don't even have to worry about a laptop setup or anything like that. I could just have my big screen for whenever I'm here at home doing my work.
Well,
I never even thought of that.
They have displays all over the place that are very affordable. I've seen 27-inch displays starting at $150, and then they go up from there, which would even be somewhat of a decent display. It wouldn't necessarily be the best display on the market, but figure if you are looking at around the $300 range for a display, $200 range for a display, you can find a 27-inch display that you can either plug into the Mac Mini with HDMI or Thunderbolt, actually is what it would be, for really affordable. I mean, and so you're into a Mac Mini out of the box without any updates and a display, for like $600-700. And the only thing I would probably say that you should definitely invest in is some sort of Apple keyboard, because the Windows ones are a little bit weird because the keys aren't the same for keyboard shortcuts and all that. So you don't have to spend a lot of money. You can get a Logitech, or there's a ton of them out there, but make sure you get a keyboard that's like an Apple style keyboard so that you have all of the Apple stuff on there, But you can use any mouse. You can get a $20 Logitech, whatever kind of mouse you want, so.
Well, and there's another trick to that too. If you already have a TV, you already have a monitor.
No, thanks. I have a TV, but I'd rather use my TV as a TV instead of a combination TV/monitor. And I don't really have the setup. And because I don't really have the setup to be like putting it on a, like I have it, the TV sits on its own stand. So it's like moving it to the desk would be kind of catastrophic because it's bigger than my desk is almost.
I know how that
bigger
goes.
Than the spaces, like bigger than the spaces on my desk. I don't want you to think my desk is like tiny, but I don't know. It's just not a good idea for me.
I had an Amazon TV and it fit on my desk really well because it had a stand that was below it. It didn't have legs. And so when I updated my TV to a new TV, it had legs and it did not have that stand. And so the legs on a 55-inch TV went out longer than my desk. I'm like, uh-oh, this is a problem.
Yeah, that's how this is. That's how this is. This just has legs.
It doesn't have like a stand. The advantage of using a TV is that you do get the speakers and all that through the HDMI, so you don't have to have anything separate for that. So that's why I recommend, trying a TV if you're starting out and those kind of things, like a 27-inch or something small. And today is the October Prime Deals Day, and they're having really like $100 for a 32-inch Amazon Fire TV.
It would be a good time to look for a display. There's probably displays all over the place. You can get a nice 27-inch display at a really big discount today.
Yep.
Get an HDMI one that'll plug right into the Mac Mini.
When this podcast comes out, it will that sale will be over. But But there'll be more deals on TVs and monitors for the rest of the year. But yeah, that Mac Mini is a very good deal. And then they have the Mac Mini Pro, which has the M2 Pro.
Right.
And that's pretty exciting to have a desktop with a Pro processor on it.
Definitely. I actually have one of those. That's what I'm using. So
How are you liking it?
I love it. It's awesome. The Mac Mini I originally had is an M1. It's the first generation M1. So right when M1 came out, the first machine I bought was a Mac Mini with an M1 in it. I maxed it out at 1 terabyte and 16 gigs of RAM, and it's still a screamer. It's an incredible machine.
Yeah.
I use it all the time. And then when the M2 Pro Mac Mini came out, I got one of those, and that's just an incredible machine also. It's super fast, and it just is a workhorse. I love it.
So
I'm over here looking around on Google now. Sorry.
So let's go ahead and move on to the next machine type they have, and that's the iMacs. And there's not much to talk about here. They're great. They look like an iPad on a stand, is really what they look like. But they're still M1s.
Yeah, they haven't updated them in a while. So you still have only a 24-inch display model. So that means it's an all-in-one with a 24-inch display. And currently it has just still only the M1 in it. So this leads me to believe one of two things. Either they're going to kind of phase out the iMacs because now they have other machines that are more capable and they can make them more cost effective by, selling machines that don't have a built-in display, at least in terms of a desktop, or they're getting ready to launch some sort of new iMac. And now I don't know if the next iMac is going to be both. They used to have two models. One was a 21-inch and then it was a 27-inch, or actually it was a 21.5-inch and then it was a 27-inch. They haven't updated the 27-inch at all. It's still only Intel model, and I'm not even sure they sell it anymore. They discontinued the 21.5, and that's what they came out with this current M1 iMac. It's 24-inch, and it has colors and all the basic stuff. So it's still a good machine, but at this point, I think it's getting a little long on the tooth.
Yes, it is. And then we have the Mac Studio. Now that's like a Mac Mini, but beefier, and it supports the M2 Max and M2 Ultra, which is two M2 Maxes put together, which is pretty impressive.
It kind of reminds me of the typical PC tower, but maybe a little smaller.
No, it actually does not look like a tower. It looks like a bigger Mac Mini.
It's basically the size of two Mac Minis.
Oh.
And if you get the Ultra, it actually, they changed the heatsink from aluminum to complete copper, so it's really heavy.
Now, the thing I really like about this, and a lot of people really like about this machine, is because they doubled the size of a Mac Mini, they had some extra room in the front, so you've got a lot of ports just right on the front of the machine, which is really convenient. I feel like that's kind of a downfall for the Mac Mini is the ports are only on the back. There isn't any ports on the front. So if you get a Studio, you get ports on the front as well. I think that's a great option if you're changing interfaces or external hard drives in and out all the time or whatever the case may be. It's much easier just to have it right there on the front than to have to always reach around the back and try and figure out where you're sticking something in back there and all that.
Yep. And then the biggest of the big is the Mac Pro. We have the Mac Studio and the Mac Pro now. The Mac Pro is the desktop tower. We call it the cheese grater.
Yep.
And because the front of it has a bunch of holes, it looks like a cheese grater. Classic design. And they've changed the design before, and we as Mac users hated it. It didn't matter if we had a Mac Pro or not. We hated the trash can, which is what we called it. And now we have the cheese grater back in a different form, but we do have it back. And that thing we could add IO controllers and all these different types of things and stuff like that, but it supports the same processors, not like one past the Ultra. It just same chips, but more ability to add sound cards and other things. Not even video cards, though. That's the weird thing, but I think you could get up to 24 terabytes of hard drive space in there and all kinds of crazy stuff. Yeah.
I think it goes up to like 128 gigs of RAM or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or 192.
Yeah. That machine is insane. They didn't really change it much. All they
No.
really did was change out the processors and made a couple of small
I think it's mostly empty
modifications
in there.
Yeah, I mean, those same processors are in the studio. So
Mhm.
if you're looking at the studio and how small that machine is compared to the Mac Pro, it is probably just tons of room in there. Now, if you're doing crazy rendering, if you're doing, full blown production audio, video, and stuff like that, you probably don't have a lot of issues with it overheating in that machine with so much room. I mean, if the fans come on, it's still going to really cool the machine down a lot, just because there's so much space.
You could put so many I/O controllers. The power supply in there is probably huge, but I mean, I think it's like $4,000 to $6,000 starting price. So that's huge too.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely, if you start bumping it up, it gets expensive real quick.
Yeah. So I think those are all of the different Macs. So, if I were doing any video or any of that kind of stuff, it would be the 16-inch or the studio. But I don't do the quality of video that's needed for that. Although now with the spatial video stuff on the iPhone, that's a new, kind of a new area there. So I'm very glad that I have my M1 Max, but I think the M3 Max is going to be needed to even do some of that stuff now. So it really just depends on what you're doing, right? If you're doing web browsing and all that, the Mac Mini M2 is perfect. If you're just doing browsing or basic audio editing or basic video editing, although that's going to work great for you, right?
Yeah. And I want to go back to the MacBook Air just for 1 second, because I just want to make sure everyone knows that a few months back, we did get a MacBook Air M2 15-inch, which we didn't talk about.
No,
I will just quickly hit on this and just say that there really isn't any difference in that machine from the M2 MacBook Air, except for it's a little bit larger. It has a 15-inch display now, so you can choose the M2 MacBook Air in either a 13-inch model or a 15-inch model, which is a really great option. People have been wanting to have a MacBook Air that has a bigger display for a long time. There's only been a 13-inch option up until now, actually. This is the first time they've had a MacBook Air in a 15-inch model. And I don't really think there's any difference in it at all. They're exactly the same, except for the battery might be a little bit larger. But other than that, they're pretty much exactly
There's two more speakers behind the screen. And that's the one thing on the Air is the speakers are behind the screen instead of on the sides. So keep that in mind. But the speaker, there's two more speakers or at least two more subwoofers on the 15-inch. So
right, so you get a little bit of better audio and possibly a little bit longer battery life just to the battery being a little bit bigger.
So to bring it to back to displays for a second, I did look and I did a search. LG is actually selling their 27-inch OLED monitor for $299.
That's a
for
good
the 60
stream. That's a great deal.
Yeah, for the 60 watt power delivery with USB-C and HDMI.
Fantastic.
So, yeah, that's a great deal for that model.
I'm thinking that's probably the route that I'm going to go, is getting a Mac Mini, a keyboard, a Magic Trackpad, and this monitor here.
Yeah, that's great. A lot of people who aren't buying the studio display from Apple tend to go to the LG models because they're just really solid alternatives.
Yeah.
And they're really affordable too. Like, they're a really good bang for your buck type of display because they really know what they're doing.
I think there's one
that's the OLED LED.
I think there's one comparable to the studio display I think it's called the Ultrafine.
Yeah, I think that runs around.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah, and that should have speakers and camera, just like the.
It does.
I actually think it does have Thunderbolt, so you just plug it into the back, and then everything. You have a hub on the back, and everything you need right there. So
that's going to be a good option. Yeah,
and at that price, it's really good. They used to be more like around $600-700.
Yeah,
the 90 watt one is like $700.
Oh yeah,
but I'm not gonna get the 90 watt. I'm gonna get
that's even better than the studio because it's a 60 hertz refresh.
Yeah,
on the studio.
But for what Alicia's doing, the $299 version would be great.
It would be great.
Yeah,
like I would love the 90 hertz refresh rate. That would be great.
I think that's the route that I'm gonna go because it's honestly less expensive than trying to buy a laptop, especially since the iPad does what I need it to do, and I can use that as my on-the-go device.
Well, I mean, you could get her out with a Mac with a monitor and keyboard and all that for around $1,000.
Yeah,
So that's not bad. I
yeah,
think we need to go ahead and wrap up, right, Marty? I think we're coming to your.
Yep. I got a hard
yeah.
deadline.
Yep. So let's go ahead and quickly do our apps and where we can be found online. So, Marty, do you have an app that you'd like to pick this time, and where can people find you online?
I actually didn't pick an app this week. I'm sorry. It's been a crazy week. So I'll come back with one next week. If people want to track me down, I'm on Mastodon, Marty at unmute.community. You can find me there.
Maybe you'll owe us two apps next week.
Yeah, maybe I'll there you go.
Ooh. Bum, bum.
All right, Alicia, do you have an app for this week, and where can people find you online?
I do, and I'm probably gonna end up stealing one of your apps. So it's something that Michael got me into. It's an RSS feed subscription app, basically. I don't know how to pronounce it. Lire? Lire?
Lire.
Yeah. Lire. I have been hooked. I have put all of the blogs I subscribe to and a ton of things in there to look at and check out because some of these news apps are just really notification heavy. I don't know. I'd rather be able to look at all the articles I want to look at from there. Super cool. And then if I want news, I'll just check a news app, But yeah, I'm liking that. I've been playing around with it.
If we're going to talk about RSS readers just for a quick second, going off of what Alicia's saying, I'll let everyone know about NetNewsWire, which has been around a really long time. It works on iPhone, iPad, and Mac. It's free. It has cloud sync, so you can be synced in all the places. And it's just a really awesome, straightforward RSS reader that works really well. And it's in all the places. So
is it
check
cheaper
that
than
out.
$9?
It's free.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's totally free. It's open source and totally free. Yeah.
I'll check that out next because I love Lire, but I want to just see what's out there,
Yeah, NetNewsWire is amazing. It's free. It's been around forever and it just works. So check that out.
Check that out. Thank you, Marty. So you owe us one next week. So you did pick one.
There you go.
All right. And where can people find you online, Alicia?
Oh, I totally forgot. I'm not used to talking about my socials. Anyways, I am Alicia Geary on Facebook and LinkedIn, Blind One Lives, or Alicia Geary on Discord. On Mastodon, I am Blind One Lives at techopolis.social. And my website. You can find me on my website at blindcopywriter.com. So yeah, that's where you can find me online.
Fantastic. And my pick for this week is an app for iOS, Mac, iOS app, Mac, and iPad that is not on Windows, unfortunately. It's called DevonThink, DEVON Think. And it's basically kind of like a one-person Notion or similar to Obsidian, but you could create databases, you can link to different documents, you can add RSS feeds, sort them however you want. I've been playing around a lot with that. You can sync it through iCloud. It's not a cheap product. It's like $99 a year, but it does really good organization and lets you put code snippets or markdown, HTML. You could do a lot of different things for authoring in this app. So it's a fantastic way to not collaborate. You can collaborate with it in some weird ways, but it's a good way to collect your thoughts and to really get things organized so that you can, like say you have links for specific things that you work on or blog posts, you could collect them in the app. So DevonThink on Mac, DevonThink to go on iOS. So check that out. And that's my app pick. If you want to find me online, I'm Mike Dowies at techopolis.social. I'm Mike Dowies on X, Michael Dowies on Facebook, and you can email me at mikedowies@icloud.com. I'm in all the places. Just search for Michael Dowies and all that good stuff. I want to thank Marty and Alicia for being here. It's been a great 5th episode of the iCast, and we'll be back next week, and who knows what we'll talk about next time, because we did talk about the Mac this time, so we may do a combination, iOS and Mac. I think it'd be fun to talk about some different things. So we'll do that next time. We'll have to stay tuned to find out what that'll be about. And we'll be back next week for another iCast. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
See you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.